forgive us for the delay. We had some technical difficulties. Yesterday we had air. Back to hot today. You all may be seated. I need to, are you ready, Mrs. I'm not opening the door trying to trick y'all. Yes, ma'am. You ready?
Yes, ma'am.
We're on the record. I need to inform both parties that on yesterday afternoon, at the conclusion of testimony, one of our jurors informed the bailiff that she had had a professional relationship with Trooper David Armstrong as part of her job as a fraud investigator. I believe he had worked on something. So before we start this morning, we need to bring her in and question her and make sure or see if both of you all are satisfied or if you'd like to have her excused. I've asked the bailiffs to... Yes, sir.
Without broken.
Yes. Thank you. You all may be seated. Ms. Trooper Armstrong. We have the jurors not wore their coats and jackets. They would have air conditioning. Ranger Armstrong, I'm sure you're aware you're still under.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Hermes, I believe you were still conducting your direct examination.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Ranger Armstrong. Let's go back. Can you tell the members of the jury a little bit about you? Where did you grow up?
Yes, sir. So I grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana. My father, he retired from the federal government, and we made a series of moves around the country every time he promoted, and I ended up graduating high school in Jacksonville, Florida.
And did you go to college?
I did.
And where did you go to college?
I went to college at Baylor University in Waco.
And after graduating college, ultimately did you join the Department of Public Safety?
Yes, I did.
And when did you join DPS, Texas Department of Public Safety, DPS for short?
That was in October of 2002.
And what does a trooper recruit go through to become a law enforcement member of the Texas Highway Patrol and Department of Public Safety?
So we went through a 6-month academy where we were housed at the academy at the headquarters in Austin. We would be there from Sunday night till Friday evening, and we would go through a series of classroom exercises based on the penal code, the criminal code of procedure, the health and safety code, the traffic code. We'd also go through training of firearms, driving, arrest and control techniques, search warrants, arrest, search, and seizure, and a myriad of other subjects that would prepare you for being a police officer on the road.
And once you graduate from the academy, you're a member of the Texas Highway Patrol, is that correct?
That's correct.
You're Trooper 1?
Yes, sir.
Rank. And where was your first assignment?
It was in Cleburne, which is just southwest of Fort Worth, and the county is Johnson County.
And what are your duties as a trooper with the Texas Highway Patrol?
So our primary duties were to work traffic patrol on the highways, any U.S. or state highway, all the back roads, county roads, city streets. But our main focus was to enforce traffic laws on those rural highways, to work accidents that happened outside of the city limits, and also to assist the local city and county law enforcement that was there.
And in the course of your duties, was it, as you said, you sometimes had to assist local law enforcement? Would they need assistance, especially in the outlying counties like Johnson County and things like that, with arresting violent felons and things like that?
Yes.
Eventually, did you become a member of the SWAT team?
I did.
And can you tell members of the jury how DPS has, what a SWAT team is with the Department of Public Safety, and what kind of training you get to be on the SWAT team?
Sure. So in October of 2007, I went through selection for our SWAT team. At that time, it was a collateral duty team, which means that you had your main job as a trooper on the road, and then we also did SWAT part-time. SWAT stands for Special Weapons and Tactics. And we were trained for high-risk warrant services, to do dignitary protection, and also to respond to active shooter situations, hostage rescue situations, and barricaded person. During that selection, you go through a myriad of mental and physical exercises to test how you'll react, or how closely you will react, or how you will react under stress. And
Are we going somewhere with this?
Judge, I'm getting into the Ranger's background and qualifications. He's a lead investigator in this case.
Well, I don't think we need a recitation of every class. It is of the essence. So your objection is sustained.
As a member of the SWAT team, you were trained and had to deal with dynamic, rapidly evolving, tense, stressful encounters with suspects, correct?
absolutely.
Eventually, did you apply for or become accepted with the Texas Rangers?
I did.
And what are the Texas Rangers?
Texas Rangers, the lead criminal investigative agency for the state of Texas.
And what kind of, how did the Texas Rangers get involved in the criminal investigation normally?
It's very similar to how we would assist local agencies as troopers. Some smaller agencies in the rural areas may not have the manpower, the resources, or the experience to conduct investigations, and so they will ask us to assist us in either taking over the entire investigation or supplementing their investigators in order to come to a conclusion.
And when did you join the Texas Rangers?
December of 2011,
And where were you assigned?
here in Garland, Dallas County.
That's Company D.
Yes, it is.
And how many Rangers are assigned to Garland?
4.
And what is your rank within the Department of Public Safety? Is it the sergeant?
Yes, I'm sergeant.
And since your time with the Texas Rangers, have you assisted with investigations or been on the lead investigator of multiple homicide cases?
Yes, I have.
And have you been assisted with the investigation or been the lead investigator with many officer-involved shooting investigations?
Yes, I have.
And as a Texas Ranger, are you trained with all aspects of crime scene investigation, interrogation, everything that you need to be equipped to adequately investigate these cases?
I am.
Ranger Armstrong, how did you get involved in the case that we're here for involving Amber Guyger?
On September 7th, we were requested to assist with the investigation initially from Dallas PD Chief Renee Hall.
And this incident occurred on the evening of September 6th.
That's correct.
And what time about approximately were you notified that y'all were being asked to assist Dallas Police Department?
It was a little after noon on September the 7th, that Friday.
And is it unusual, like you said earlier, it's not unusual for the Rangers to be called to assist with local law enforcement, correct?
That's correct.
Now, you normally worked with Dallas Police Department on officer-involved shootings.
No, sir, this is the first one in our history as far as I'm aware of.
At some point on September 7th, did it change from assisting Dallas Police Department to the Rangers, and particularly you, are going to be the lead investigators on this case?
Yes, it did.
And so there's somewhat of a difference from arriving at the scene shortly after an incident occurs and joining a day later, correct?
Absolutely.
Did you have to play catch-up?
Yes.
And what did you do to get caught up on and familiar with the aspects of this case?
So the first thing I did was I responded to Dallas PD headquarters here in downtown Dallas. I met with Detective Eddie Ibarra and Detective Dale Richardson because they were the lead investigators from their special investigative unit at that time on this investigation. I needed to learn as much information about the incident as possible and as quickly as possible, so I knew what direction our follow-up investigation needed to take. At that same time, the other Rangers that were assisting me, I sent them to the scene so they would be able to get eyes on what I was learning about, and we would be able to communicate back and forth what they're seeing and what we may need to do in order to bring about drawing all the information that we needed to draw from the scene and the information that the detectives from Dallas were relaying to me.
And had you worked with Detective Ibarra before?
I had, yes, sir.
Homicides or other cases?
Yes.
And were you able to review body cam footage?
I was.
Did you listen to the 911 call?
I did.
May I approach her?
Yes.
Excuse me.
Where's the bench? May I approach the witness desk?
Yes.
Ranger Armstrong, I'm going to show you some photos, make sure they're accurately. Defendant's Exhibit 29 is a still photo from one of the body cams that shows another officer in the position of his body cam. Does that fairly and accurately represent a still shot from one of the body cam photos?
Yes, it does.
And the defendant's exhibits 30 and 31 are from that officer's body cam, and 32. Does that fairly and accurately depict still shots from one of the body cam videos?
Yes, it does.
I'll offer defendant's exhibits 29 through 32. The droves, and then the other is just to show where the position of his body.
No objections, Judge.
They're all repeated.
While I'm up here, Ranger Armstrong, I'm going to show you a series of photos that were taken of apartment 1478 and ask you if those fairly and accurately represent the scene. This was, after CPR and paramedics had come in and Dallas police came in and took photos.
Yes, they do.
This time I'd offer defendants exhibits 33 through 36.
I have no objection.
They're all admitted as well.
And I want to show you two pictures of apartment 1378. And if that, ask you if that fairly and accurately depicts photos from apartment 1378.
Yes, it does.
And this time I'll offer defendants exhibits 37 and 38.
I have no objection.
They're all admitted also.
So Ranger Armstrong, when you started looking at this case, were you, did you want to see, well, Miss Guyger lived at the time in the same apartment complex as Mr. John at the Southside Flats, correct?
That's correct.
And Miss Guyger lived in apartment 1378 and Mr. John lived in 1478.
That's correct.
The shooting occurred. Miss Guyger walked into 1478 and shot Mr. John in his apartment, correct?
That's correct.
Did you want to compare look at 1478 and 1378, just to compare the layouts? And for 1478, it's a crime scene, and 1378 is important to see if it was similar or not to 1478.
Yes, that's accurate.
Thank you. So this is the first body cam still shot I showed. This is Officer Zachary Boudreault with the Dallas Police Department. And does that appear to be affixed to his torso, a body camera?
Yes, it does.
And Defendant's Exhibit 31, this is from Officer Boudreault's body cam that's affixed to his torso. And that's, is that a fair and accurate depiction of a view from the doorway?
Yes, it is.
And just looking at the scene, just describe what you found of value in apartment 1478 as far as deciding where the shooting occurred and where Mr. John was located at the time.
Of interest, it'll be hard to see from the distance, but there's two shell casings that I observed. Basically, in the kitchen, in front of the dishwasher.
And Ranger Armstrong, I don't know if that video is showing. I think you can draw it. It might not be activated. Was that? Let me do it my turn. Was it in this one casing by the water bottle, and then another casing back here in the kitchen area?
Yes, sir. That's where they were.
And then as we look in, we see some blood on the floor right there. Was that, as we've seen in the body cams, was that where Mr. John's torso, about where below his armpit would have been?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
And those flip-flops that are on the floor, was that about where his feet were when he was lying on the floor?
Yes, sir.
And again, this is just another perspective from the doorway, looking into the apartment from the viewpoint of Officer Boudreaux's body cam, understanding the visual limitations of body cam.
Yes, sir.
And again, Defendant's Exhibit 36, does that show a clear view of the flip-flops and then the position of where below Mr. John's armpit where he'd been laying on the floor?
Yes, it does.
Was there ever any evidence of blood that was collected from the couch area?
No, sir, there was not.
Was there ever any evidence of blood that was collected from the floor area below the couch?
No, sir, there was not.
The focal point of the blood, was it all on the ground where Mr. John's torso was?
Yes.
These AirPods that are on the floor there, when we see the body cam footage, they're right by each ear of Mr. John, correct?
Correct. They were, from my recollection, as he was lying on his back during the life-saving measures.
Judge, objection, non-responsive.
So, below his earlobes, the AirPods appeared to be directly below them, which indicated to me that they had fallen from his ears whenever he fell.
I want to show you Defendant's Exhibit 37. And is that the apartment of Amber Guyger?
Yes, sir.
Was the layout of the apartments exactly the same?
Yes.
And was Ms. Guyger's TV in the same position as Mr. John's TV?
Yes.
And was Ms. Guyger's couch in the same position as Mr. John's couch?
Yes.
With regard to the Southside Flats apartments, did you go there on a number of occasions?
I did.
And would you characterize it, or was it a confusing layout in that each floors mirrored each other's almost identical?
That's accurate.
Describe to the jurors what your findings were on how the garages floors were labeled or laid out, and what visual indicators you had as to what floor you were on.
Okay. So the first time I went there, I had the parking garage design and layout had been described to me, so I had formulated what I thought I would expect to see. I expected to see a parking garage labeled kind of like.
I'm going to object again to non-responsive.
Describe, Ranger Armstrong, the first time you went, how you encountered the parking garage and what visual indicators you had to indicate what floor you were on when you were going to that apartment complex.
The first time I arrived at the apartment complex, there were no clear, obvious visual signs showing what level you were on. As I went to the crime scene on follow-up days, I found that there were small,
I object again to non-responsive.
Is the question and answer, please? Ranger Armstrong, as you visited on numerous occasions, the first time you went, you didn't see any readily available visual indicators. What, as you eventually found, were the only visual indicators of what garage floor you're on?
on the instep, or on the frame of each elevator, there is a small black placard that has the level number on it. And as I drove by, I would look for that placard, and it would display what garage level you were on. That was the only visual indicator that I had.
And is that something you had to be looking for?
Yes.
And did you ever park on the wrong floor?
Yes.
Just in the course of your investigation, you unintentionally parked on the wrong floor?
I did.
With regard to going from the garage to the interior of the complex, what visual indicators are there to let someone know what floor they're on?
There are none.
So walking into the entryway, there's nothing readily apparent or available to let you know what floor you're on, correct?
At that time, no.
Have you been back since this incident or since your investigation, and have they made changes to the labeling of each of the entryways from the garage to each entrance to indicate what floor you're on?
Yes, they have.
And what were those changes?
It was a placard with a number on it that indicated which level you were on.
But at the time, on September 6th, that wasn't there, correct?
That's correct.
Now, each elevator had a number on it on the inside of the frame, is that correct?
That's correct.
And there was a fire escape, some type of placard to the left of the elevator that had a small number on it, correct?
That's correct.
Other than that, there was no other visual indicators of what floor you're on, correct?
There's a red placard for reserved spaces. I don't know how many spaces there are, but they're very close to the elevators. And for instance, if it said parking space 419, I learned that the first digit correlated or corresponded to the parking garage level you were on. And I developed that on subsequent visits to the apartment complex.
It's been discussed that Ms. Guyger drove a white Dodge truck. We've seen the videos of that coming into the garage on that evening of September 6th, correct?
Correct.
And based on your investigation, was it determined that she parked the Dodge truck on the 4th floor and backed in facing the entrance into the apartment complex?
Yes.
We could draw up State's Exhibit 170. And does that show Ms. Guyger's truck?
Yes, it does.
And that's backed into the one of the spots there at the Southside Flats.
Yes, sir.
And then if we go to State's Exhibit 175, and does that show from the driver's side of the Dodge Ram truck to the entryway and I'm going to press the button and hopefully the TV doesn't. All right, where that arrow is pointing, is that the entryway to the apartment complex?
Yes, it is.
And to the, if someone walks directly from their car from the Dodge Ram truck to the entryway without looking at the elevator and without doing a 360 turn to look at to see if the skyline's showing and things like that. If they're just focused and walk directly towards that entrance, there's nothing around that entrance that would indicate what floor you're on, correct?
That's correct.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
Ranger, I'm going to show you what's been marked as defense exhibits 53 through 62, and ask if you recognize those as photos from the third floor from the parking garage down the hallways leading up to apartment 1378.
Yes, they do.
And then I'm going to show you what's been marked as defendant's exhibits 44 through 52 and ask you if those fairly accurately represent the entryway from the garage into the apartment complex on the fourth floor and down the hallways leading to apartment 1478.
Yes, they do.
At this point, I'll offer defendant's exhibits 44 through 62.
What are the sources?
Here's 9 photos taken the day after.
These, so these-
Yeah, these are all discovered.
okay, but I guess what he's taking.
I
I
say
think
like,
officer there.
I don't know, it's the day after.
Your Honor, may we have just one second? These were the photographs taken by the Dallas Police Department, where the Rangers, as part of their investigation, without representation or knowing to be an honorable man. I have
I'm
no
sorry,
objection.
I can't hear you, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have no objection to 44 through 52 with the representation. These were taken by the Dallas Police Department.
Did you get honorable on the record? Okay.
In close. With respect to State's Exhibit number 53, or Defense 53 through 62. I have no objection.
You have no objection to
No,
any
ma'am.
of them? So photographs or defense exhibits 44 through 62 will be admitted.
Ranger Armstrong, I'm going to show you Defendant's Exhibit 44. Well, it's Defendant's Exhibit 46. It shows the entranceway into the 4th floor. And there's, when these photos were taken, there's a scooter that's resting the door open, but to your knowledge, that scooter had no evidentiary significance, or there's no indication it was there on the evening of September 6th.
I don't recall if it was there the night before or not, but it didn't have any evidentiary significance to us.
So Defendant's Exhibit 44 is the entryway into the 4th floor. And does that show the perspective of just someone looking at that entryway and just focusing on that entryway?
Yes, it does.
And Defendant's Exhibit 53, that's the 3rd floor, close to the same perspective, correct?
That's correct.
And if we put them right next to each other, when you're focusing just on that entryway, there's no major differences, correct?
That's correct.
The sun might shine differently on the 4th floor than the 3rd floor. If you're looking, you might look to your left or right and notice things that are about the level of the building that are different. But if you're just focused on going from the entranceway into the hallway, there's no readily apparent indicators of what floor you're on, correct?
That's correct.
Since that time, they put numbers, clear numbers next to the entryway.
They have.
And then, can't really see 45. This is the elevator to the right of the 3rd floor. And is this placard contains a small number that if you went over and you looked at it, you could tell what floor you're on?
Yes.
And then on the inside of the door frame, facing inward, several inches high, there's a number that correlates with the floor, correct?
That's correct.
Other than that, when you're walking in, if you don't go over here and look at it, then you don't know what floor you're on as far as from visual indicators.
Correct. Minus that red placard if it's not blocked by a vehicle. Talking about that.
This will show what, if you walked around here, you could see a reserved spot.
That's correct.
And if you were parked in one of the reserved spots, then you would actually be actively looking for that.
That's correct.
And then Defendant's Exhibit 46 is the entrance into the 4th floor next to Defendant's Exhibit 46 is the entrance into the 4th floor, and 55 is the entrance into the 3rd floor. And outside, if the scooter wasn't there, it's the exact same design of the entryway, correct?
That's correct.
Defendant's Exhibit 47 is the view from the entryway into the 4th floor hallway. And then Defendant's Exhibit 56 is a view from walking from the garage entryway to the third floor. And are these very similar?
Yes, they are.
Now, where are the numbers on the doorways? Or where are the numbers to indicate what floor you're on?
If you look on that mirrored glass to the left of each door frame, that's correct. There's several banks of LED lights, and the numbers indicating the apartment number are between the top and second bank of the LEDs.
And if you're just walking at eye level, you'd have to look up and specifically look to make out those numbers, correct?
Yes.
Now tenants have the option of putting out floor mats, so there might be different floor mats on floor 3 than there are on floor 4, if you're looking for that, correct?
That's correct.
As we continue down the hallway, this is floor 4, and this is the third floor. And again, unless you're noticing that there's a pineapple floor mat or some type of brown floor mat, you're not going to notice unless you look up to the apartment number, correct?
That's correct.
And as you get closer to each apartment on Defendant's Exhibit 50, the 1478 is on the other side of this column, is that correct?
That's correct.
And Defendant's Exhibit 58, 1378 is right on the other side of this column, correct?
That's correct.
And as we get closer, coming down the fourth floor hallway, we see 1478 on the other side. And if you're looking, you could see the red mat protruding slightly from the other side of the column, but it's not, you don't see it until you're right up on it, correct?
That's correct.
And this is the similar view to 1378.
That's correct.
And if you're looking at eye level, there's absolutely no difference, correct?
Correct.
And then as we approach the apartments from eye level, this is apartment 1478, is that correct?
That's correct.
And that's Defendant's Exhibit 52, and Defendant's Exhibit 61 shows apartment 1378. So if you're just from eye level, it's the exact same unless you look up and to the left to the apartment number. Correct?
That's correct.
But if you're focusing on just the doorway and the putting your key fob in, there's no reason to look up and to the left, and there's nothing on the door or in the doorway that indicates what door number you're in.
That's correct.
Was that the layout of the apartments and the tremendous amount of similarities, was that significant to your investigation?
Yes, it was.
Did you direct a team to interview tenants to investigate whether this was a common problem as far as parking on the wrong floors, walking to the wrong apartment, or putting your key into the wrong apartment door?
Yes, I did.
And in that, did you, the Rangers, with the assistance of Department of Public Safety, CID detectives, and other law enforcement members, try to knock on every door and interview every tenant in that apartment complex?
Yes, we did.
And you weren't able to, some people didn't want to be interviewed, some apartments are vacant, and some people just never responded, correct?
That's correct.
About how many people did you interview?
We interviewed 297 of the 349 residents that are on the rolls for Southside Flats Apartments.
And of those, how many on all floors had walked to the wrong apartment on the wrong floor, put their key in the door?
Of all floors,
Yes.
that would be 15%.
So about 46
That's correct.
individuals, and then was it a higher percentage of just the individuals that lived on floors 3 and 4?
Yes, it was.
And how many were on, what was the percentage on floors 3 and 4?
For
Placing their key in the wrong door?
22%, excuse me, 23% had done that.
So that was 38 individuals who lived on floors 3 and 4, had unintentionally walked to the wrong apartment on the wrong floor and got their key fob all the way in.
That's correct.
With regard to just walking to the wrong apartment on the wrong floor unintentionally, did you have 92 or 31% of the tenants total on all floors had done that?
That's correct.
And with regard to unintentionally walking to the wrong apartment on the wrong floor, did you have 71 tenants on floors 3 and 4, approximately, 44% of the tenants on floors 3 and 4 had responded affirmatively that they had done that?
That's correct.
And with regard to tenants that had unintentionally parked on the wrong floor, and 93 or 32% of the totals in floors 1 through 4 had done that?
Yes.
And 76 or 47% of floors 3 and 4 had done that?
Correct. That's correct.
Was that significant to your investigation?
Absolutely.
With regard to the door frame of apartment 1478, did you, in your investigation, find for lack of a better term, a structural flaw that caused the door to occasionally not latch all the way?
Yes.
Can you explain that to the jurors?
Yes, in reviewing the crime scene photos, I observed that the strike plate, which is where the bolt goes in to catch and secure the door, the curved part of it, which the throw kind of brushes against to go into the actual hole, it was bowed out. And when I looked further at that, it's called a strike plate. I looked inside where the throw goes, and I could see a crack in line with the screws that had been driven into the door frame. It appeared that those screws had been over-torqued into the doorway, causing that strike plate to bow out, which I believe would cause the throw, as the door would sweep shut, it would cause the throw to create more drag, slowing it down and making it possible for the door to not close all the way.
Yes.
Ranger Armstrong, I want to show you defendants exhibits 39 through 43, and that these ask you to look at those. And do defendants exhibits 39 through 43 show photos taken of this issue with the strike plates that you were discussing?
Yes, it does.
And do they fairly and accurately depict those?
Yes, they do.
Offer defendants 39 through 43. And Ranger Armstrong, y'all know they can draw on the video.
I think you can touch on it. You can touch on the screen.
Touch on the screen. There we go.
Okay.
Okay. So if you can go through what you saw in the strike plates with the jurors with using the photo.
Sure. So what I was referring to is the strike plate. It's going to be this metal piece in the door frame here, the one that's closest to the floor. And you can see that it's not as it's not perfectly vertical. It would be. I could try to tell you where that crack inside the door frame is, but you can't see it on this photo. But you can see there's a small amount of curvature right. I can't make it that fine, but right about there, where that door plate begins to bow out, and it's deeper into the wood than it should be.
And I'm going to show you defendants exhibit 40. And again, can you point that out on this photo?
Sure. So this is the strike plate again, and right about here is where the top of that strike plate begins to bow out, and you can see right here there are, I guess, tool marks, for lack of a better term, from the throw brushing against the strike plate as it sweeps closed.
And then defendants exhibit 41, does that show close-up of this issue?
Yes, it does. So if you look right here at the wood on the bottom part of the strike plate, it's exposed because that bottom of the strike plate is driven too far into the door frame. And if you look right here, the gap between the wood and the strike plate is displayed because these screws were torqued in to the point where it bowed the metal out into the area where the door throw would sweep.
And defendants 42, this is the door. Do we see kind of the same, the tool marks or the evidence of it striking up against that?
Yes.
Did you perform an experiment, for lack of a better term, with the district attorney's office where you went to 1478 and you let the door close when it was kind of the conditions were similar to September 6th as far as humidity and rain? Did you conduct an experiment to see if the door would not fully latch if it was just let go of.
Yes.
And tell us what you saw and what you experienced with that.
So we opened the door a series of times from different distances, from completely open and halfway open and somewhere in between. On multiple occasions, the door would close all the way, and the door would also not completely close, depending on the distance. And we were just letting go of the door, not using any force. And sometimes it would close all the way, sometimes it wouldn't. It depended on the distance.
And when it didn't close all the way, what was an example of a distance where it was let go of and it didn't close all the way?
Approximately halfway open, enough for somebody to be standing between the non-hinge side of the door frame and in the doorway.
So enough for you to fit through?
Yes.
And so from that distance, it would, not every time, but there was an occasion at least where it, when let to close on its own, it didn't fully latch.
That's correct.
And yesterday we watched the video with Ranger Daniel. There was a video that we watched yesterday where you, and I think it was called Daniel, Ranger Daniel took the video.
Yes, sir.
Of 1478, and it was just documenting the crime scene as it existed, 2 days later.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
And in that video, we can go to 803. I'll stop it there. So Ranger Armstrong, the condition of the door there, is it closed but not fully latched?
Yes, that's correct. It is.
And was there anything keeping it in that position other than the fact that the door didn't fully latch?
No, sir. Just the throw is resting on the strike plate, and it's not completely latched.
And so if you're on the other side of that door and you just pushed it open, if you just pushed on it, it would open, correct?
That's correct. It would.
You can keep playing. So we see on the video the condition of the door when it doesn't latch fully, correct?
That's correct.
And that's apartment 1478.
Correct.
Just to be clear, from the video, that's not the day you did the experiment, correct?
That's correct. It's not.
But it had rained. It had rained on September 6th, and so you wanted to, when you did the experiment, it was a day sometime in September that had a similar amount of rain or humidity. Is that correct?
It actually may have been in October, but it was sometime, but the weather conditions were very similar to that of September 6th.
So the experiment, when you did the experiment, that was in October, but it left the door in a similar condition as we saw on the Ranger Daniel video of 1478. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Judge, want me to reverse the bench?
Yes.